If you're an expat who owns property in France, or you're thinking about buying, there's one thing you absolutely need to understand. France will tax your property, even if you don't live here full-time. And yes, the French tax system is exactly as complicated as everyone says. But don't worry, I'm going to break it down simply. In this video, we're going to talk about taxes in France, why they exist, who pays them, and why expats get taxed even if they don't live here. Then I'll tell you the story of what happened when I personally visited the tax office. Let's start with the basics. Taxe foncière, the annual property tax. This is the big one. If you own property in France, a house, an apartment, or land, you pay this tax every single year. It doesn't matter if you're a resident or a non-resident. It doesn't matter if you live in Canada, Australia, or on the moon. If the property is in France, France wants its tax. It usually ranges from about 800 euros to 3,000 euros per year, depending on the region and the property. Due every year in the fall. This tax applies simply because you own the property, even if you never set foot in France. Taxe d'habitation, only for second homes. France abolished this tax for primary residences, but if you're an expat, your French home is almost always considered a second home. So yes, you still pay it. Some cities even add a surcharge, sometimes 5% to 60% for second homes in high-demand areas. If your French home is not your main residence, expect this tax. Renting out your property, you pay tax too. If you rent your French home, whether long-term or on Airbnb, you must declare that income in France. Non-residents pay 20% tax on rental income up to 29,315 euros, 30% above that, plus 17.2% in social charges. Even if you declare rental income in your home country, you still need to file in France. A 30% standard deduction may apply. Even occasional Airbnb income must be declared. Selling the property, capital gains tax. If you sell your French property, France taxes the profit. You pay 19% capital gains tax plus 17.2% social charges. You get full exemption only after 22 years for capital gains and 30 years for social charges. Yes, 30. IFI, wealth tax on real estate. This applies only if your French real estate is worth more than 1.3 million euros. If that's you, congratulations, and my condolences. Mandatory occupancy declaration. Since 2023, every property owner, including expats, must declare who lives in the property on the French tax website. If you don't, you can be fined. So why must expats pay these taxes? Because France taxes based on territoriality. If the property is physically in France, France has the right to tax it, regardless of where you live. It's that simple. Final message. Owning property in France is amazing. The lifestyle, the food, the views, but the taxes, they're part of the package.
And just when everything about French taxes seems perfectly clear on paper, real life steps in. And real life always has its own plans. That's why next, I'm going to tell you what happened when I actually went to the tax office myself, and how that visit turned into a small adventure. I came for information about taxes and left with a heartwarming reminder that French kindness can defeat any language barrier. I came to the Service des Impôts des Particuliers, the tax office, to find out how and when to pay the property tax. It seemed simple enough. What could be easier? But I forgot one small detail. I don't speak French, and the office clerk didn't speak English. So there we were, standing in front of each other, smiling, nodding, like two people absolutely convinced they're about to understand everything, while understanding absolutely nothing. An important detail, I'm Canadian, but my country of birth is different, and my native language is not English, and that's written in my Canadian passport. The office clerk took my Canadian passport, opened it, looked at the place of birth, noticed my very non-Canadian country of birth, and quietly said something to himself. Then he sat down at the computer and started typing. For a long time, a very long time, so long that a line formed behind us, a big line. But, and here's the surprising part, no one complained. Everyone waited patiently, as if this was a normal part of French bureaucratic meditation. I stood there, not understanding what was happening. He typed, the line stayed silent, we smiled. He typed even faster, the line still stayed silent. I started to think he had forgotten about me and was just doing his own work. And suddenly, he jumps up, runs into the next room, prints something, and comes back to me beaming, like someone who has just done something very good. Then he hands me a detailed instruction on the land tax, and, who would have thought, the instructions were in my native language. He did everything he could to make sure I left with an answer, and with the feeling that I'm not a stranger here. I was shocked. The shock quickly turned into overwhelming gratitude. I could barely stop myself from hugging this completely unfamiliar man for his understanding and generosity. It turned out that I had to receive the final documents in another office. The clerk printed a map of the town and drew the route with a red marker, and of course I found the office without any trouble. And there they greeted me as if I were an old acquaintance, because the first employee had called in advance to let them know I was on my way. In those two offices, I met lovely people who were not only doing their jobs professionally, but treating every client with thoughtfulness, warmth, and kindness, no matter what language they speak. And that's when I realized the French can be incredibly attentive, sometimes even too attentive, but that's exactly what makes life in France so warm. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next episode.